And I think we'll have to get to like 30. Started like 3 minutes after. So. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Safe Routes to Partnership's first webinar of Cycle 6 of California's Active Transportation Program. My name is Jonathan Matz. I'm California's Senior Policy Manager for the Safe Routes Partnership. This is the second ATP cycle for which we're doing webinar series, a 3-part webinar series. And we wanted to kick off this cycle with a focus on the application to create a plan. It's one of five application types in the Active Transportation Program. And one that we want to highlight that maybe isn't necessarily as well known, but we think has a lot of potential value for applicants, and particularly for first-time ATP applicants who are looking to develop a pattern of sustained success in the program, and want to make sure that they're doing so on a solid foundation. A little bit about us at the Safe Routes Partnership. We know many of you in California, but we are a national nonprofit organization that advances safe walking and bicycling schools and parks, major community destinations, seeking to improve the health and well-being of kids of all races, income levels, and abilities. And in so doing, fostering the creation of healthy communities for everyone. As I mentioned before, I'm California's Senior Policy Manager. We have a regional network with statewide work here, and one of the services that we provide to practitioners and agencies in the state is technical assistance for the Active Transportation Program and resources for applicants to it. So we started this webinar series, as I mentioned before, in ATP Cycle 5. And the goal of it is really to help primarily first-time and under-resourced applicants to the ATP that maybe have not been successful, to help to better understand the application process and some best practices in being successful for it. We produced a guide to the ATP in advance of Cycle 5. You'll see the link there. We're going to be updating that later on this summer. We're currently working on updating it, and we'll have those revisions out right around when the guidelines process kicks off for Cycle 5 in the fall. And a little bit about our plans for following webinars. As I mentioned before, this is a 3-part series. And we usually time one of our webinars in earlier winter, and then another one in spring, right around when applications are finally released. It's generally our pattern to have the last of these webinars focused on whatever changes have occurred in the guidelines and the applications themselves, so that applicants who have been through a few cycles aren't caught off guard by anything in the new applications. And we're still working to figure out what will be the program for our winter webinar, depending a little bit on what we're seeing in the guidelines workshops and the like. As I mentioned before, we're focusing on webinar today on the planned infrastructure, on the planned application type. And as a reminder, particularly for first-time ATP applicants, it's one of 5 different applications for the ATP. Starting in cycle 4, the active transportation program applications are split up into category types. So you can get funding to create a plan. You can get funding for a non-infrastructure program, and then 3 different levels of infrastructure grants depending on the amount of your project, with applications growing in length and demand as your project size grows. And all infrastructure applications can include a non-infrastructure component as well. And as we've described in previous resources, those tend to be those combined infrastructure, non-infrastructure applications tend to be the most successful. So a little bit about why we chose to focus today's webinar on the plan application, and our goals in this webinar series is really to highlight what we think is a consistent pattern of plans funded by the ATP being a kind of a foot in the door, so to speak, for particularly smaller, under-resourced agencies with great active transportation needs to start building up a track record of success in the ATP, and particularly being used as a way to set in motion successful infrastructure grants in subsequent cycles. We wanted to talk a bit about what you need to do as part of the application process, what you should already be looking to have in place within your agency and with community partners before the application goes in, as well as kind of delineating that from what is actually going to be supported by the ATP grant when you're successful, and the planning process once that funding comes in, and how it will be fleshed out. So we'll talk a little bit about what you can expect from the consultant that an ATP grant will enable you to hire to do most of the plan development, as well as what your involvement will be during that process, and talk about what makes for the strongest applications for plans. A little bit about our presenters today. First up will be Corey Wilkinson, who is Active Transportation Manager at SCAG, that's the Southern California Association of Governments. He describes himself as possibly the most unprofessional professional in the field. He's a transportation planner with a true passion for getting things done. We have him joining us today in his capacity at SCAG, and also to talk about his work in his previous position at the city of Santa Ana, where his primary responsibility was the planning and implementation of the city's active transportation program. And during his 5 years there, he completed 5 active transportation related plans, including a Vision Zero, 2 complete streets, a safe routes to school plan, and an active transportation plan, and used those to quadruple the miles of on-street bicycle infrastructure in the city, successfully pursuing $100 million in grant funds, in large part on the foundation of those plans, setting the example for partnering with community-based organizations in planning efforts and establishing education programs. Next up, Roger Paleo is the Director of Tool Design's Southern California office. He's proficient in various facets of transportation planning at the regional, corridor, and local levels, and has worked on projects throughout Southern California. He's led technical teams in the preparation of various transportation planning studies, including safe routes to school and active transportation plans, traffic impact studies, and benefit cost analysis for the prioritization of capital projects, tactical urbanism demonstration projects, first, last mile, and complete streets projects, circulation elements for general plans, community plans, and mobility studies at neighborhood and community scales. He currently leads a multidisciplinary team that has extensive experience in identifying grant opportunities, technical writing, reviewing grants, and preparing a roadmap of funding sources that leads agencies to be successful in their plans. Next, we have, and finally wrapping it up, we'll actually have two presenters from the California Transportation Commission. Alinka Chingazi is a program analyst who works under the CTC's Active Transportation Program and is also the lead on the aeronautics program. She's been with the commission for approximately 3 years and has also worked under the local streets and roads program. Aliko holds a bachelor's of science in textiles and clothing with an emphasis on marketing and economics from the University of California, Davis. She enjoys spending time outdoors and reading in her free time. And finally, Beverly Newman Burkhardt joined the California Transportation Commission as the Assistant Deputy Director for the Active Transportation Program last May in 2020. Before coming to the CTC, she worked in healthcare policy and financing at the California Department of Healthcare Services. She also has experience working for global development, public health, and environmental nonprofit organizations. She holds a BA in political science and Arabic and a Master of Science in International Development, both from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. She's an avid cyclist and bike commuter. With that, I am going to hand it over to Jorge.
Hey everybody, my name is Corey Wilkinson. As Jonathan mentioned, I am the Active Transportation Program Manager at Southern California Association of Governments, SCAG. It is a pleasure to join you guys today. I spent quite a bit of years working for the city of Santa Ana, and so a lot of my presentation is going to talk about a lot of the work that we did there because it was more on the implementation side. At SCAG, I oversee the MPO component and the ATP programming for the region. It's a lot less sexy, a lot less exciting, but it is good work because it's a necessity for assisting our local agencies in doing this kind of work. So I have a significant amount of experience doing local agency implementation. I'm going to talk about the city of Santa Ana for a bit. In the city of Santa Ana, Santa Ana is an under-resourced city. It doesn't have a significant amount of funding in the general fund for CIP projects, things like bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So one of the things that I was tasked with there is figuring out how to get more money to come to the city. So in cycle 1, we funded 8 projects. They were smaller projects, about 4.8 million. Cycle 2, there were 6 projects, 13.8 million. Cycle 3, 3 projects, 13.5 million. As we moved along, we started getting a lot more infrastructure funding. The early cycles, we had a lot of planning projects rolled into there. Cycle 4, we funded 4 projects, just about 21 million. And cycle 5, the city of Santa Ana, after I left, funded 2 projects, 5.6 million. So as Jonathan mentioned, in the 5 years that I was with the city of Santa Ana, we did 5 active transportation related plans. We did a Vision Zero plan that was adopted in 2016. We did a A Safe Routes to School plan that was adopted right after I left in 2020. The Active Transportation Plan was adopted in 2019. And then we did 2 Complete Streets plans. And these are what we kind of considered small neighborhood focused, like mini active transportation plans. We did one for the downtown that was adopted in 2015. And then we did one for Central Santa Ana, which is kind of the densest part of the city, in 2018. So a lot of planning efforts, a lot of planning work, and that is significantly what led to a lot of the ATP funding that we were able to secure over the years. I'm going to talk a little bit about what went into those plans and the kind of planning work that you really want to, the kind of things you really want to think about as your, as you attempt to scope out an active transportation plan. You want to make sure that the engagement that you're doing is accessible for all ages and abilities. Oftentimes, I would find myself to be the only one wearing a headset and receiving English translation because the community meetings were being hosted in Spanish because that was the primary language in the community. But you want to get community-based organizations involved to help bring folks to your community workshops, your community events, and your engagement activities. And you want to make sure that it's accessible for all ages and abilities, whether it's kids, whether it's seniors. You want to make sure that everybody has the ability to be able to participate. A lot of the folks that you see in these pictures are leading the discussions are the community-based organizations who we actually hired to lead the engagement efforts for those planning efforts. You want to get out of the workshop and you want to go for a bike ride, you want to go for a walk. We even took a bus. You can see in one of these pictures here, one of the participants, she was in a wheelchair, she had broken her leg, riding a bicycle actually. And she went on the transit tour. You want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to get out into the community and show you exactly what is happening in the community, what exactly is what exactly their experiences are like, and then you want to make sure to include those experiences in the narrative of your planning documents. You want to give the community the power to be able to make the decisions. Don't go into a planning effort with a preconceived idea of what needs to go where. Allow the community to tell you what they think needs to go where. This is going to help to build upon ownership of the projects when the projects get funded and then move forward. And it's going to allow for communities to really feel like their voices are being heard and the implementation is going to be in line with what their desires are. Perhaps the most important thing advice that I can give to folks is when you're writing up your scope for an active transportation plan, you want to spend a lot of time thinking about what the final product is going to be. A plan is only as good as your ability to be able to implement it. And when it comes to active transportation plans, you want to make sure that you have all the tools that you need in order to implement those plans. So if your plan is just giving you a map that shows you where all the bike routes are going to go and where the pedestrian focus areas might be located, you're probably selling yourself short. There's going to end up being a gap when it comes time to try and secure funding for those. So you want the final product to include some amount of top priority projects. In the active transportation plan that I did, there was 35 projects that were identified. In the complete streets plans that I did, one of them had 5 projects, the other one had 15 projects. And these projects are fully scoped out. They've identified where the improvements are going to go, what types of improvements are going to be there, and then what the cost estimate is going to be for the project. So you want some level of engineering work to be involved. This is an example of what I would consider meets a minimum requirement for meeting the infrastructure grant requirements for the ATP program. It just shows a line on a map, but then it highlights exactly what is going to go where, what some of the cross sections are going to look like, and what some of the some of the improvements will be located, and then it gives you a cost estimate there. So that is kind of the minimum. This is something that's a little bit more detailed, and would look great in your application. This shows you exactly what the right-of-way would look like. This happens to be for a protected bike lane, and it's showing where the infrastructure is going to go. And then you want to have a separate cost estimate, engineering level cost estimate for this project. So each one of these projects has some sort of drawing, a cut sheet, and a cost estimate. And photos. Photos are good too. And then you can take it one step further. This is it happened to be the busiest intersection in Santa Ana. It was the intersection of 17th and Main, right next to Santa Ana College. 17th and Bristol, and this is a massive intersection. It also happened to be the highest collision intersection in the city. As you can see, you've got Santa Ana College on the left. On the right is a shopping center. It's got Starbucks. So obviously that's an origin and a destination there. So then we did a conceptual rendering of what it would look like. And you can write all of this graphic work into the scope of your planning document, so that the plan itself produces these types of drawings, produces these types of final products, and gives you something that you can really use to both sell the project to your city council, sell the project to the community once they've already kind of selected, and let them get an idea of what it's going to look like. I use this particular graphic to present on a lot of conversations talking about removing travel lanes in order to better accommodate and increase safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. So you want the final product to be something that is actually useful. Otherwise, the plan is just going to sit on a shelf, and it's not going to give you an opportunity to implement it. So that's kind of my sales pitch for everyone. Plans become an amazing tool for implementing active transportation networks within your communities, and is definitely a good place to start if you're a local agency that would like to do some of this type of work. Go after the planning first before you go after the infrastructure. Here's my contact information. If anybody has any questions or wants to talk about what a good plan looks like, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help and share my experiences with anyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corey. And next we'll go to Roger Paleo.
There we go. All right. Well, thanks, Corey. That was a great tee off for my presentation. So I'm Roger Paleo, the Southern California Office Director for Tool Design. And before I dive in, I want to share that I am thrilled to be part of this panel and provide advice in creating a successful active transportation plan. The advice in my presentation comes from not only having prepared active transportation plans, but also having prepared successful grant applications using the resources from those plans to fund much needed infrastructure in those communities. Let's see. So here's a quick outline of what I will be sharing today. If you are thinking of applying for funds to prepare a plan and want to know how involved an agency will be in this process, then this will help you get an idea. These 6 key steps will help you understand what you can do to prepare as a lead agency and what to expect during the plan development process from your consultants. So you are planning to apply for funds to prepare a plan, or you just received the funds and will be getting ready to prepare the plan. You may ask yourself, is there anything I can do to prepare before? Well, yes, there is. And let's find out what you and your agency can do to prepare in advance. One of the first questions I ask a lead agency is who they have identified as their internal project team. These plans require input from multiple departments. Therefore, it will be important to involve city planners, traffic engineers, health professionals, transit agencies, and even your GIS analyst. It is important to be clear about everyone's role in the process as well. So from the beginning, since the consultant will be leaning on their knowledge of the community and at different stages within the project, the lead agency can prepare a preliminary list of key stakeholders. The consultant team will obviously help narrow down this list to ensure that there is a well-balanced group to represent the community's vision and goals. I like to recommend that a lead agency identify a preliminary list of possible steering committee members. I feel that this is a critical step in ensuring representation from all members of your community. You may ask, well, will the consultant take care of this when they come on board? Well, yeah, the answer is yes. However, if the lead agency wants to get a running start in creating this plan, synergy, then this will be helpful. The next step is something that a lead agency may not consider as an important step. The amount of available resources will dictate the breadth and depth of the active transportation plan. So good results require good data. For a consultant to prepare a robust analysis to inform and support the recommendations, they will need the lead agency to gather this data. One of the first things that I provide a lead agency during their kickoff meeting is a data request checklist. So we can assess the amount of work already completed and the data available to us to better understand how much we need to invest in the information gathering and existing conditions elements of the plan. So having a lead agency identify what data is available and determining who has access to each of these resources will help inform the consultant team. You don't have to worry about analyzing the data. The consultant will take care of that, but having a preliminary list of available resources will go a long ways. So now that the lead agency has identified their team and have the available resources, it's time to start the plan development process that is tailored to the local community. From our experience, these are the key ingredients that combine to create a successful plan. Now, I'll be talking in more detail about these over the next few slides. The consultant team will customize their approach for the plan and work with you and the local community to complement the local context of your community. As a lead agency, you should be involved in all of these steps to ensure the final deliverable represents the vision of the community and lays out a framework for your implementation. So the goal as a consultant is to identify a network for your community. And as a lead agency, you will always be more familiar with your local network. Therefore, you should be there to assist in talking about it and creating the vision so that that vision comes to reality and it moves from an idea to infrastructure on the ground. So fundamentally, the two primary goals for an active transportation plan is to set a course for increasing bike and pedestrian mode share and also improve safety. So to achieve this, we need to recommend a bike network that is low stress and well connected, provide a pedestrian network that serves schools, transit, and commercial destinations, and has infrastructure that has a seamless integration with key destinations. So the consultant team will utilize the data that the lead agency has provided and run a variety of analysis that will identify areas of improvement, as well as areas that are not well connected. So this is why that key first step in preparing, even before you have the funding, will be important, is in providing that data to the consultant. Now you know what the data is telling us. So it's time to be informed from the community of their needs. So every project is different, and community engagement should be tailored to meet their project needs. Corey gave a great example on how City of Santa Ana did it, and it shouldn't stop there. So the consultant team will put together an engagement strategy based on their understanding of the community. However, the lead agency should help to ensure that the engagement strategy is inclusive in the process. The engagement strategy will look different in every community, but there are a few core principles that are true for any community that a lead agency should consider. The first is that it's important to start with the menu of options and choose the tools and techniques that best reach specific community groups. For example, community members such as seniors, people with limited English proficiency, and youth will require a specialized attention. The second is financially investing in community relationships can ensure ongoing civic participation in the future. And finally, providing engagement opportunities that are not only physically accessible, but linguistically, time appropriate, and financially accessible to reduce the financial burden of civic participation is important in this step. We all are feeling the stress of balancing life and priorities during this past year. So, the main point I want to make here is that the consultant team should have a deep toolbox of online and in-person engagement strategies that are adaptable to any stage of the plan process. Web-based outreach is incredibly cost-effective and can reach a huge audience, so that's an option. However, it does have its limitations, especially with non-English speakers, which is why the in-person outreach is still also valuable as well. So, as a consultant and as the lead agency, work hand in hand with your consultant to identify what works in your community. You yourself knows what will work within your community. So share that knowledge with the consultant to create a successful engagement strategy. Our next ingredient for a successful plan is to make it focus on implementation to create momentum. Again, not to piggyback on Corey, but he set some great examples. They implemented a lot of plans for Santa Ana, and they were very successful in pursuing infrastructure funding. So now that the consultant has analyzed all the data, collected community feedback, and identified the projects, it's now time to evaluate each project in order to prioritize. This can take many forms and will require the lead agency to help inform the implementation steps. So the lead agency should be an equal partner to ensure the plan is feasible and implementable based on the resources available. We understand, there's some communities that they may not have the available resources, but view the consultant team as an extension of your staff. That's what I always try to emphasize on the projects that I work on. The last step is to ensure the plan is feasible and grant ready. The plan should have a roadmap that identifies a list of projects, the priority of each, cost, and the funding source. The consultant team will provide the lead agency a detailed engineering evaluation with cost estimates that will be needed for grant applications. Now, there are many funding sources, not just in the ATP, and each has different criteria. So it will be up to the lead agency on how they apply and how they bundle projects. I've worked on multiple plans that will take, say, back to school quarters, for example, and bundle different identified projects just to share the benefit within the entire community. The typical process for applying for funds, designing and constructing infrastructure may take a few years. So the lead agency should have other methods identified as well to get projects on the ground faster. Some of the techniques that I've recommended for local agencies is look at their capital improvement program. Is there some quick, fast, ready projects that can be identified and implemented if there's some roadway repaving going on? So that's a quick technique to really get projects on the ground. The lead agency should view this plan as an investment for their implementation future. So, in my opinion, it is imperative that the lead agency is involved in the process so that the plan prioritizes the community needs, creates a balanced network for all users, and provides the funding and implementation strategies needed for short and long-term success, and is assembled in a way that can be used to pursue different grants. It's imperative that the plan is not only easily accessible, but you can extract all the data that you will need for the multiple types of funding sources that the lead agency may pursue. I want to share a few projects that were recently awarded in the ATP Cycle 5. Back in 2018, I was part of the Barstow Active Transportation Plan, and Jonathan actually reached out to me for assistance on a grant application for the city. And I was really excited to hear that Barstow was pursuing this level of grant application. So what they did is they bundled some Safe Route to School quarters, and for the ATP Cycle 5, they were able to obtain $6.4 million in infrastructure funds to start implementing their active transportation network. A recent project that I helped finalize for the City of Ontario was their active transportation master plan. And we weren't even done with that project yet, where we were already assisting the city in developing a grant application and identifying which corridor was in most need. So they took some of the information that we were already preparing and bundled that into a grant application, and we're very successful in bringing in $4.8 million in infrastructure funding as well. So, to close off and pass it on to my next colleagues, we're eager and willing to help out in any way. We're also available to answer any questions after this. Pass it on to you, Jonathan.
Yes, thank you so much, Roger. So you've heard a lot about the development of plans and best practices for doing so. But of course, I wanted to bring back the conversation a little bit to the main theme of today's webinar, which is how do you get ATP funds to actually create one of these? And so I'm going to hand it off now to Beverly and Alika from the California Transportation Commission to talk a little bit about what they've seen in their capacity in terms of what stands out in successful plan applications, and what you should really be focused on as you pursue ATP support for this planning process in your city.
Thanks, Jonathan. Hi, everyone. I'm Beverly Newman-Burkhardt. I'm an Assistant Deputy Director at the California Transportation Commission and one of the managers of the Active Transportation Program.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alika Changizi, and I am one of the analysts under the Commission's Active Transportation Program.
So today we're going to go over some best practices for developing an active transportation program plan application. And Alika and I were both heavily involved in the evaluation process for the latest ATP cycle. So we recruited, trained, and managed the evaluator teams, and we each evaluated over 100 applications. So hopefully we can provide some good tips for you today. So before we go over some more specific tips and examples, we wanted to give you some more basic guidance. First, we wanted to remind you that the application and guidelines change every cycle. So the tips we provide today are based on the best applications we saw in the 2021 ATP cycle, and they're based on the current guidelines and applications. So this fall, we'll be conducting workshops with stakeholders across the state to help develop guidelines for the 2023 program. So we just recommend that you stay involved in that process and you stay up to date with the latest changes. And one theme you'll see as we go through this presentation is that the applicants who receive the highest scores use the scoring rubrics as they develop their application. Our evaluators use these scoring rubrics to evaluate the applications, and so they're a very important tool for our applicants, and they are available on our website. So when it comes to plan applications, they must benefit a disadvantaged community. This is to ensure that the communities with the most need are prioritized. And the plan application is the only application type currently that has a cap on the amount of funding. So only 2% of the funds from each cycle can go to plans. But they tend to be kind of the least expensive project type. So in the 2021 program, not many plans were funded. Only 2 out of the 21 eligible plans ended up getting funding. So this could be due to a few things. This cycle, we had our highest cutoff score ever, a 92 out of 100. And this, coupled with the heavy weighting of the disadvantaged community question and the plan application, may have made it difficult to obtain funding without a perfect or close to perfect score on that disadvantaged communities question. And we'll go over that in a second. Also, plan applications are shorter than the other application types. So it's possible that this, along with the fact that they aren't building a tangible project yet, may make it difficult for applicants to show benefits. However, we definitely do not want to discourage you. Plans do get funded each cycle. And during our guidelines development process, we'll be working with stakeholders to find ways to make it easier for applicants to tell their story and to show the benefits of their plans. So again, we definitely recommend that you stay involved. So we'll start going through the questions on the application. So the disadvantaged communities question is worth 30 out of the 100 points in the plan application, or at least it was in the latest round of the ATP. And all other application types, it's currently worth only 10 points. So the heavy weighting of this disadvantaged communities question is again to ensure that the communities with the most need are prioritized. And unlike other application types, plan applications are not scored on a direct benefit narrative, but on disadvantaged community severity and plan area only. So you receive 15 points for severity, or basically how disadvantaged the community actually is, and then up to 15 points for plan area. So how much of the area that the plan covers is a disadvantaged community. So we recognize that not every community is the same. So as with the rest of our application types, there are multiple ways to qualify as a disadvantaged community, and we have them listed here. Median household income, free and reduced price school meals, the Cal EnviroScreen tool, Healthy Places Index, and there's also a other and regional category on here to qualify. However, we have to note that you can only receive a maximum of 2 points if you use that other category currently. And so we always suggest that communities try out various options to see which DAC qualification category works best for their community. So definitely go through each of these options and see which one works best for you. So I will now hand things over to Alika, who's going to go over the priority and statement of need question.
Great, thank you so much, Beverly. So the priority of funding and plan question focuses on the priority to fund the development of community-wide active transportation plans within or encompassing a disadvantaged community. And that includes pedestrian, bicycle, safe routes to school, or comprehensive active transportation plans. With this question, it's broken out into 2 parts. Part A focuses on the priority of the plan, and Part B focuses on the statement of the need. And so with Part A, this subsection has set points based on the applicant, based on if the applicant has a plan and how old that plan is. So communities without any type of active transportation plans are prioritized to ensure that the communities with the most need are prioritized. So to put this to scale, applicants that don't have a pedestrian, bicycle, safe routes to school, or comprehensive active transportation plan receive the most amount of points, and the applicants that are seeking to update a pedestrian, bicycle, safe routes to school, or comprehensive active transportation plan that is less than 5 years old receive the least amount of points for this section. So for part B, this subsection is asking applicants to describe the active transportation problems or deficiencies within the plan area. And so applicants are asked to include the community's active transportation needs and describe why this plan is necessary to meet those needs. So talking about lack of infrastructure is incredibly important. Discuss why the current infrastructure is insufficient. And then next, talking about injuries or fatalities to the non-motorized users. And so here we're really looking for discussion and analysis of your collision data. What time of day did the collisions take place? Was it light or dark outside at the time of collisions? Who was involved in the collisions? And if there's any sort of specific areas in the community that have similar types of collisions occurring repeatedly, really take the time to talk about that and discuss the importance of it in relation to your plan. Another important thing to talk about is connectivity and mobility for your users to get to their key destinations. So here, really talking about how the plan will address the needs of the community in terms of connecting to their key destinations. It's important to be very specific here, identifying these destinations and explaining their value and importance. And if your plan is benefiting a disadvantaged community, it's important to discuss key destinations in relation to those community members. So if they'll be accessing grocery stores, job centers, healthcare facilities, these are all great things to include in your narrative. And then local public health concerns is another big portion of this sub-question. So here we're really looking for you to identify specific local public health concerns or health disparities and discuss really how the plan will address these issues. So it's really important to dive into detail here. Is asthma, heart disease, or childhood obesity an issue within your community? Just stating walking and biking is for health because it increases physical activity is not really sufficient. It's not really explaining what the issues are, and it's not really tackling how your plan will look to address those concerns. And it's also very important to include comparisons to countywide and statewide or nationwide data. There's also room for you to include any other topics that would support this question. So this is a good space to include any valuable information to the plan that you want us and the evaluators to be aware of. And if there's any attachments that were included with this question, this would be a good space to discuss those. Additionally, under Part B, applicants receive additional points for their ability to demonstrate the active transportation need of students. So this question is given either all or none of the points. So if you are able to demonstrate the active transportation needs of students in your narrative, then you'll receive all points. And if you don't, then you won't receive any. And so one thing to note when responding to the sub-questions under Part B is that it's important to remember that the evaluators may not know anything about your community. And so providing them with as much detail as possible through your narrative and attached documents and really telling the story of your community is going to help you gain as many points as possible for this question. And Beverly, if you could go to the next slide. This is an example of an excellent discussion of public health issues from an application from this past cycle. And I'll just quickly go through this. So according to the County Health Rankings and Roadmaps database, Siskiyou County ranks 57th out of 58 counties in California for overall health outcomes. Over 32% of Siskiyou County adults are obese, and the county is one of only 6 counties in California to have obesity rates that have risen over 10 points since 2000. I won't read the whole thing, but that in itself provided so much information. So the applicant is including comparisons in their narrative to state and nationwide data. They also continue and discuss how the plan will address their health disparities, and they also did an excellent job discussing their non-infrastructure programs and who they would reach in their community through their non-infrastructure program. And with that, I will hand it back over to you, Beverly.
Okay, so the next question is the public participation and planning question. So unlike other ATP application types, the plan application is asking you about future engagement during the development of your plan. So just as a reminder, when it comes to this question, the best responses are as detailed as possible. So the evaluators will be looking for discussion of key stakeholders, and you should specifically name these key stakeholders and explain why they are key stakeholders. So these key stakeholders could include community groups, specific neighborhoods or communities, tribal governments, emergency services, other government agencies like education departments or the public health agency, community resource centers, and other examples like that. It could also include an existing or new local advisory committee. And just make sure as you're discussing these stakeholders that you're also discussing what kind of role they'll have in the process, and why they're important and why their input is important. You should also be discussing the type and number of events that you will hold. So these could be workshops, open houses, pop-up events, presentations, or meetings. But make sure that your engagement plan provides plenty of opportunities for the community to provide input and not just learn about the plan, and also discuss how you will take that input and you'll be integrating it into the plan. So one thing that you should also be making sure that you do is discussing how you'll make your engagement events accessible to the community. So where will they be held, and why is this the best location? Is it easy for community members to get to the meeting on foot or by bike or by transit? What times will they be held? Will they have things like translation services and childcare services? So you should also discuss your outreach methods. So how will you get the word out about your plan and participation opportunities? So this can be things like project websites or social media campaigns, email blasts, mailers, posting flyers around the community in key destinations like community centers or grocery stores or libraries. And then again, as you're developing your application and your engagement plan for your plan application, make sure that you are discussing how the community will provide input and how it will be addressed and integrated into your plan. So I will not read these examples to save time. However, these are some examples from successful applications, how they discuss accessibility to their engagement events. And they're both very detailed, and they provide lots of great information. And I know Jonathan will be sharing these slides afterwards, so you can take a deeper look at these. All right, I will hand things back over to Alika.
Great, thanks, Beverly. So with the implementation question, this is asking applicants to describe how the plan will lead to implementation of the identified projects. So more specifically, what we want to see here is discussion of how will the final plan result in specific projects that can lead to future active transportation applications. How will you prepare to implement projects identified in your plan? Will you adopt supportive policies or program projects into the regional transportation plan? How will you quickly translate the projects and programs identified in the plan to be tangible programs and infrastructure, as well as identifying any specific funding sources aside from ATP funds that would be available to fund the implementation or infrastructure projects or non-infrastructure programs identified in your plan. And if you could go to the next slide, please. And so the plan development or 25 plan question asks applicants to provide a complete 25 plan. And just to make sure I don't confuse anyone, the 25 plan was previously referred to as the 22 plan. And so because of the local assistance program guidelines, chapter 22 was replaced with chapter 25. The forms have been updated to the 25 plan and will be called as such for the upcoming cycle. And so the 25 plan is an Excel document that must be completed for all plan applications. So it's important to make sure that you're using the correct version of it as identified in the application and the scoring rubric. And it's broken out into 4 total sheets within the Excel document. So the first tab provides instructions on how to properly complete the document. The second tab provides is the plan components tab, and this is where you'll be checking boxes for the component or components the plan will include. If there are any components that you are not including, please make sure to explain why that component is not applicable. The third tab is the scope of work template, and this tab defines the scope, cost, and deliverables of the plan. It also provides the details as to how the required plan components will be included throughout the development of the plan and in the final plan. And the fourth tab is an example of what the scope of work is, an example of the scope of work, which is provided as a reference. So it's important that your 25 plan includes a clear scope that is split into multiple tasks and subtasks. All of your tasks and subtasks are detailed and specific. There should be reasonable tasks and subtask costs included, along with reasonable timeframes. And it's also important that your 25 plan be consistent with your narrative responses throughout the application. The evaluators will be looking to see if the processes and activities that are described in your narrative are also reflected and easily found in the 25 plan. And we always like to shout out our Active Transportation Resource Center. They provide additional resources, technical assistance, and trainings. So if you would like any further assistance with your 25 plan, we highly encourage you to reach out to them. And so just a few general tips and reminders. The guidelines, applications, and scoring rubrics change each cycle, so it's important to stay involved in the program. Prior to the call for projects each cycle, commission staff travels to regions across the state, holding workshops and visiting projects. And so similar to last cycle, we'll be doing 2 different types of workshops. We'll be doing central workshops, which are more formal and just the traditional workshops that we typically hold. And we'll also be holding branch workshops, which are more informal and focus on educating the regions on the program basics. So if you are interested in commission staff coming to your region or your community for a workshop or site visit, please contact us, and we are happy to put together a schedule that will work. Again, we would like to encourage all of our applicants to use our scoring rubrics while you're completing your cycle 6 applications. These are updated prior to the call for projects each cycle and are posted on the CTC and Caltrans ATP websites.
All right. Also, as Alika mentioned, assume that your evaluators don't know anything about your community. So provide a lot of detail in your application and really tell them the story of your community. And then one way to do this, or at least to help to do this, is to use photos and maps to enhance your application. So make sure that you provide clear photos. And one thing that we suggest is providing photos of people actually using current facilities so that evaluators can kind of get a better idea of current conditions and challenges. And then also just make sure that your maps are clear and detailed. And lastly, our successful applications from cycle 5 are posted on our website. So definitely use these as a resource. Just look how communities told their story, and also look how they organize things like their maps and their photos. And also definitely use us as a resource as well. We're always happy to answer questions. And I will hand things back over to Jonathan.
Thank you, everybody. That's been very informative. And wanted to thank all our presenters. As I mentioned before, please put any questions in the chat. And we'll see if we can get some quick answers for you. I wanted to remind participants our call for applications for our technical assistance in ATP Cycle 6 is still open. That'll be open until August. I believe we said 13th. I believe we've extended the deadline to. And if you have any questions about what that program involves or how we can help, please shoot me an email at jonathan@saferoutespartnership.org. You'll also go, you can see there, if you go to saferoutespartnership.org/California, our posting about the program is, I believe, should be first or first off the top on our regional news at that page there. We'd love to work with particularly first-time applicants and love to work with communities who want to do a plan as well. We've mostly worked with communities who have gone for infrastructure grants, and we're always there to help, even with different kinds of applications like this one. I should also mention that another reason to seriously consider starting with a plan as you dip your toes into the waters of the ATP is that for at least the past couple of guideline cycles, there's been discussion of eventually starting to require actually that all ATP infrastructure applications be listed in a plan of some type. It looks like there's more likely to be some kind of, if not requirement for that, then at least some incentive in the form of additional points available for infrastructure applications in cycle 6. Of course, nothing's official yet, but this always does seem to be looming as a potential requirement or incentive in subsequent ATP cycles. And as the ATP matures and starts moving into further cycles, that becomes more and more likely. So it very well may be a necessary step, or at least a strongly beneficial step, points wise, for applicants to be starting with that. And with that, I don't see any raised hands, I believe, or any questions in the chat. So I believe we can break there. And thank you once again to all of our panelists. Again, we'll be posting a recording of this webinar as well as the slides on our regional news shortly. But if you have any additional questions, please reach out to me or to any of the panelists if you caught their contact information, or I can direct you to them as well if you reach out to me. So thanks very much, and stay tuned for our next webinar in the late fall, early winter. Please consider our ATP technical assistance if you're looking to apply for cycle 6, and have a great rest of the afternoon. Thank you everybody so much.